Despite all the rotating Washington quarterbacks in the Giants and Commanders series over the years, Daniel Jones has been the constant, and he's also been the dominant quarterback between these two teams. Why Jaden Daniels might be able to break that trend in week 2 of the NFL season, coming up next on today's crossover episode of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Giants.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome in, everybody, to this week's crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Giants, both part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm David Harrison. She is Patricia Traina. We are the hosts of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Giants podcast, respectively, your daily podcast covering each of these NFL teams. And if you haven't yet, you can subscribe for free wherever you are tuning in for today's crossover episode. And on that episode, we're going to talk to you about why rookies might rule the day in this week 2 matchup this weekend, why less Jaden Daniels might actually be better for Washington, and why the Big Apple has a big quarterback problem, or remains to have a big quarterback problem, potentially. Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, all one word, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. We want to thank you for coming through for today's crossover episode, and every dayers, we want to send a special thank you your way for coming through every single day. Patricia, the New York Giants are the away team, so they will be welcomed into the warm confines of the Northwest Stadium, the newly named Northwest Stadium, formerly known as FedEx Field. JP Finley out here in the DC area says that we should nickname it the Fed. After having to say the stadium name for the first time on the show, I'm actually a pretty big fan of that. It's much easier to say. But the Giants are coming in. What big storyline on offense are they bringing in with them?
I think it starts with Daniel Jones. Last week, Daniel Jones returning from that ACL injury that he suffered week 9 of the 2023 season. Hadn't really played well up until that point. And, there were a lot of question marks. How would he look when he returned? We kind of saw some glimpses of, that were inconsistent throughout the summer in the preseason. And Daniel Jones, unfortunately, didn't really look very good last week in the loss against the Vikings. He was indecisive. He was running himself into sacks. 3 of his 5 sacks that he took, he ran himself into. A handful of pressures he ran himself into. His throws were off target. Now, granted, he wasn't the only reason why the Giants lost, why the Giants offense was so bad. You had drop passes. The offensive line was, inconsistent still. But Daniel Jones, year 6, and we're still asking, when is this guy going to finally be the franchise quarterback he was touted to be when he was drafted 6th overall in 2019?
Yeah, I mean, when you just look at the numbers, right? Stat scouting is incredibly dangerous. Like, nobody should ever just be a stat scout and say, I know exactly what a player is or what a team is by looking at their stats. But here's a stat for you to stat scout what happened last weekend. Daniel Jones, 22 of 42, 186 yards, 2 interceptions, 44.3 passer rating. Patricia, he completed 2 fewer passes than Jaden Daniels attempted. Now, we'll talk about Jaden Daniels and pass attempts here in a little bit. Right, but Jaden Daniels attempted 24 passes. DJ completed 22 of them, 2 fewer, yet he only had 2 more passing yards than Jaden Daniels did in that week 1 performance. And of course, DJ throwing 2 interceptions, JD 5 throwing 0 interceptions and running for 2 of them. Of course, one of those interceptions, Daniel Jones got Van Ginkeled the way that Sam Howell got Van Ginkeled last year inside the stadium that they're going to be playing in this weekend. Patricia, I remember when that interception happened to Sam Howell and everybody just a reaction there. What was the reaction for Giants fans and media when that interception happened on Sunday?
I got to tell you, David, I think everybody in the stadium knew what that play was going to be, where they were going to go. And if we knew it, Andrew Van Ginkel knew it. All right. As evidenced by the fact that he was able to jump the route. He was in the perfect position. And that was all she wrote. I mean, if you remember, the Giants lined up in a trips formation. They had Wan'Dale Robinson to the outside of the trips formation. It was going to be a wide receiver screen to Wan'Dale Robinson. Everybody in the press box called it. Everybody in the stadium, I'm sure, knew it was coming. And, the Giants, like, it was an unusual play call. I don't think I would have done that necessarily down at that spot on the field in that situation. But, at that point, if you see the guy covered, why are you throwing the ball? Why are you trying to force the ball into a narrow window? And that's been the story of Daniel Jones's career here. He tries to make plays. It's like, okay, we're down. I better make a play because nobody else is making a play. When you force things, bad things happen. And that's, that's what happened there.
Yeah, and I mean, it was the exact same play. Like Van Ginkel never even tried to pretend like he was going to pass rush. He completely, from the snap of the ball, stepped off the line of scrimmage, basically just said, "Throw it my way, buddy." And the same result happened. Now with Sam Howell, you kind of look at it and say, okay, he's a first-year starter, still young quarterback. He's pressing because the team is struggling. We're like midway through the season. It's been a train wreck ever since. But again, DJ, like you mentioned, like he's got the experience, and we're in the beginning of the schedule. Like you should not already be trying to force things and feeling that kind of pressure. So big problem in the quarterback position for the New York Giants. Of course, they'll be trying to rectify that. But let's flip sides of the ball. Pat, what's going on the defensive side?
Yeah, the defensive side was very surprising. We talked about all summer long this vaunted pass rush that they had with Kayvon Thibodeaux, with Brian Burns. The two of them, 0 sacks. Right.
Yeah.
The only sack, as a matter of fact, that came in the game came from Dexter Lawrence, who else? I mean, Dexter Lawrence is just in a whole other league by himself.
Hey, that sack celebration too. I mean,
yeah, exactly. Sexy Dexy, the sexy Dexy dance. But Thibodeaux and Burns, I think Thibodeaux had one quarterback hit, if I'm not mistaken, but basically they were silent. Thibodeaux didn't even get on the stat sheet for tackles. And we're all sitting there and we're saying, what happened? Now, when that pass rush does not get home, guess what? They now expose the weaknesses in the back end of the defensive secondary, where you have young cornerbacks, where you have some uncertainty. Now, the Giants have an injury back there with Nick McLeod. We don't know if he's going to play. So now Cordell Flott is projected to go back there. And that cornerback spot remains a huge question mark for the Giants. So that pass rush, that front seven is not getting the job done. Mm-hmm. You got to hold your breath and hope and pray that the back end of the defense is going to be able to hold up. And it just, they weren't able to do so on a consistent basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of stunning, right? Because you add Brian Burns to this group and you kind of figure like, okay, this is going to be a really good, effective pass rush. And the Giants defense has really had to kind of try to keep them in games over the last, few years because of what's been going on the offensive side of the ball and with Daniel Jones and even with his injury and everything and rotating through those quarterbacks, trying to replace him. So if the Giants lose their bite on defense, like that's a bigger problem. Of course, Commanders fans are hoping that lack of pass rush had more to do with Giants deficiencies than it did Vikings abilities at the offensive line, because the Commanders did not look amazing. I'll say they didn't look great up front last weekend. But let's stick with the Giants defense here. Kayvon Thibodeaux. So I saw a video where there's a reporter and, didn't get like the full context of the question because obviously I'm not there and I didn't see, and the video is kind of short, but some people kind of say like it was a fair question. Some people kind of say like, oh, he was just probing, but basically was asking Kayvon Thibodeaux about the lack of production, and Kayvon kind of was like, yeah. Next question. Were you there for that at all? Or what do you think kind of that situation? Because looking at DJ forcing passes and getting intercepted terribly, looking at Kayvon potentially already showing some frustration to reporters. I guess week 1. I mean, we got a long way to go. Are there cracks already in this foundation?
No, I don't think so. I think it was a fair question to ask. I don't know if I would necessarily have asked it the way it was asked. I probably would have said, you guys, what can you guys do to be more effective, more productive, to point out, hey, you had 0, tackles and no sacks. I mean, it was almost like, I don't want to say rubbing it in, but I would have worded it differently. Let's put it that way. I mean, it's a fair question. It needed to be asked, but I think if you ask it a little differently, maybe you would have gotten a different response. Now, as a postscript, a little fun postscript, Thibodeaux spoke to reporters in the locker room today, meaning on Wednesday, as we record this. And he said, before he even started talking, he said, okay, me and Jordan Renan, who was, the ESPN reporter who asked the question that got that initial response, we're going to engage in a charity boxing match. And Dion Dargan, who's the PR communications director for the Giants, he's going to be the official, the referee, and it was just kind of a lighthearted moment. So I guess
Right.
all is well now with that relationship. But look, these guys get frustrated too. There was a lot of frustration in the locker room after the game. Some guys, they handle it differently, and Thibodeau, I'm sure, did not care for how the question was phrased. Again, that said, it was a fair question to ask. Just maybe I would have gone a little differently if I had been, in Jordan's shoes.
Yeah, that's fair. Look, it's not always necessarily the information you're trying to get, but it's also how you present it and how you
Mhm.
go about trying to get it. So certainly understandable there. Something that Washington Commanders fans can understand is the desire to see less Jaden Daniels in the run stat box this coming Sunday against the New York Giants. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to double down on that and say the best thing for the Washington Commanders this weekend will be to see less of Jaden Daniels. That's coming up next on this crossover episode of Locked On Giants and Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're going to do that thanks to our friends over at DoorDash. Football is finally back, which means it's time to order your favorite game day food, snacks, and drinks on DoorDash without missing a single play. Football season means it's watch party season, but not every watch party takes every guest into account. So if you show up to a buddy's house and all they have is dip when you really want to plow through an order of wings, DoorDash can come to the rescue and you don't got to miss a single snap of the game. On game day, I need three things. I need finger food to keep my hands free for typing and note taking, preferably non-messy finger food. I need water. I need soda to keep me hydrated and energized. And usually a little bit of a late night something, a little bit more substantial than what the usual press box options are. But I don't feel like hitting the spot on my way home or on the way back to the hotel. So I can hit DoorDash, and sometimes I can even time it to where my order is waiting for me when I arrive. Use the promo code LOCKEDFALL24 for 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 on your first order. Limited time offer. Terms apply. Promo is not valid for orders containing alcohol. DoorDash, your door to game day greatness, your door to more. Download the DoorDash app now to order your game day favorites. Must be 21 or older to order alcohol. Drink responsibly. Alcohol available only in select markets. Today's crossover episode also brought to you by Hims. Men, when we leave the house, it's phone, wallet, keys, and how does my hair look? Looks pretty good. But if you're experiencing hair loss, you may not be so confident when you step outside your door. So it's time to get that confidence back and restore your hair with Hims. No man wants to lose his hair, but for men, it's actually pretty common. So now with Hims, the solution is simple. Try Hims hair loss solutions, and you'll be joining hundreds of thousands of subscribers who got their flow back. Hims provides access to a range of hair loss treatments that work all from the comfort of your couch. They offer personalized chewable oral spray and serum treatment options so you can find what works best for you. The process is simple and 100% online. So start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedonnfl. That's HIMS.com/lockedonnfl for your personalized hair loss treatment options. hims.com/lockedonnfl. Results vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See the website for full details and important safety information. Washington Commanders are looking to get their first win of the season, and to do it, they may actually need to see less of their star rookie quarterback. I'll explain here in just a minute. Thank you for making Locked On Commanders and Locked On Giants your first listen today and every day. Also, check out the new Locked On NFL. Locked On NFL is now 2 shows every single day. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso, and then you can roll by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk every afternoon. Add in the Locked On local experts, and you get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice per day. So, Patricia, we talked about the biggest stories. The New York Giants are packing in their to-go, or their carry-ons, rather, to bring with them to Landover, Maryland, and they're going to be walking into a situation where, coming off a loss, the focus is obviously not on sustaining as much as it is improving. And where you want to improve on offense is a little bit to do with having too much Jaden Daniels in week 1 against the Tampa Bay Bucks. So in week 1 against the Bucks, Jaden Daniels had 16 carries, 88 yards. He was the leading rusher on both sides of the ball, also had 2 touchdowns. So that all sounds like really good news. And for my fantasy team, it was very good news, to be quite honest with you. But it's also incredibly unsustainable. You can't expect your quarterback to run the ball that often. And to be fair, Cliff Kingsbury dial up 16 carries for Jaden Daniels. It's just kind of how it happened. He completed 1 more pass than he had runs, threw for 184 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, but he did have 2 fumbles. One was on a pass that ended up going backwards off the field to play for a 15-yard loss, and then he was strip sacked at one point, but the Commanders were able to recover that fumble. So you don't want if you're a rookie quarterback. But the reason I say less Jaden Daniels would be better for Washington, Patricia, is not because I want to see Jaden Daniels play less or try to throw less or anything like that. Because what if fans watch when we're all watching football as a fan? What do we watch? We watch the ball. So the ball is in Jaden Daniels' hands as he's running down the field in time. We're going to be watching Jaden Daniels more than we're going to be watching anything else. So we need to see the ball leave Jaden Daniels' hands more than the 17 times that it did against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because if we don't see it leave his hands 22, 24 times, and that means it's going to be staying in his hands, running above his legs as he's sprinting down the field. And look, we love all the sprinting that he did. And again, the 88 yards is great, but again, it's not sustainable. So you need to see other players like Terry McLaurin, Olamide Zaccheaus, Zach Ertz getting the ball in their hands so that we see more of those guys.
Yeah, and you know what, David, let me give you a fun little stat here. I talked about Kayvon Thibodeaux in the last segment. Kayvon Thibodeaux against Washington, 26 tackles, 5.5 sacks, 8 tackles for a loss. Now, you compare what he's done with against the other 2 NFC East teams. Dallas, 6 tackles, Philly, 3 tackles. Dallas and Philly, 0 sacks each. Tackles for loss, 0. So Kayvon Thibodeaux seems to come alive whenever he plays the Washington Commanders. And if you remember, I think it was last year, there was the game at Washington. He won NFC Defensive Player of the Week because he just had a phenomenal game. So there's something about playing the Commanders. And you look at the offensive line for the Commanders, your tackles are still a little, I guess, iffy. And then that's putting it nicely. So I'm curious to see how, with Thibodeaux, also with Burns, how they allocate their resources to slow that pass rush down. Hopefully for the Giants, they get that pass rush going.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Andrew Wiley on the right side certainly had some reps that he's going to want back and that he's going to try to clean up this weekend. Brandon Coleman and Cornelius Lucas both playing on the left side. The rookie Brandon Coleman actually got some reps on the right side as well, for what it's worth. But certainly some reps they're going to want back. Brandon Coleman had a couple of rookie moments. Granted, against a very exotic, very creative Todd Bowles defense there in Tampa Bay. So a lot of tackles have problems with that, not just rookies. But yeah, you absolutely want to see those things get better, because if Kayvon Thibodeaux can get it off that way, then it certainly could provide a very long day for Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders offense. And speaking of guys who tend to go off against the Washington Commanders, for the Commanders defense, the big story is their failure to launch in week 1. And if you fail to launch in week 1 and you can't find the igniter switch in week 2, Daniel Jones may continue his success against the Washington Commanders franchise. And obviously with 62% roster turnover from last year's initial 53 and this year's initial 53, most of those guys are gone, right? Most of those guys who have been getting burned by Daniel Jones in games that Commanders fans say there's no way they can lose to this Giants team, while the Giants are saying there's no way they can lose to this Commanders team, yet one of those sides has to lose. So you're looking to kind of break that trend with a lot of guys who haven't been here for the trend anyway. But one trend that didn't break in week 1, points. They surrendered 37 points in week 1. That was the second most in the NFL in the opening weekend, behind only the Carolina Panthers, who gave up 47 to the New Orleans Saints. And I'll tell you right now, in this NFL, right now in 2024, if there's one thing you don't want to be compared to, it's the Carolina Panthers. They allowed Baker Mayfield to strike for 4 touchdowns despite throwing for less than 300 yards. I don't know when the last time a quarterback threw 4 touchdowns and less than 300 yards, but it doesn't happen very often. Typically, you need a lot of yards to get a lot of touchdowns. 2 of those touchdowns went to Mike Evans, 1 to Chris Godwin, 1 to Jalen McMillan, who everybody's been ranting and raving about for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers all offseason. So it's not like a surprise player came out of nowhere and just became a stud all of a sudden. And they got to quarterback Baker Mayfield just once, despite having a lot of pressures. So they need to launch their defense in the aspect of finishing at the quarterback when you get those pressures, launch their defense into defending the pass better, at least make the quarterback throw for like 360 yards to get those 4 touchdowns and extend some drives. And they need to just turn their super aggressive nature into super aggressive production.
Yeah, you look at Daniel Jones' success against Washington. If there's going to be a week for Daniel Jones and the Giants offense to get right, you would think this would be it. Historically speaking, 10 of Daniel Jones's 62 career touchdowns have come against the Commanders. 5 of his 22 career wins are against the Commanders, and they are one of 3 teams that Jones has beaten more than once. He has a 98 quarterback rating against the Washington Commanders. So again, if you're the Giants, if you're a Giant fan and you're looking for a get-right game for this Giants offense and for this defense, this would be it. Now, the caveat, obviously, brand new coaching staff. Dan Quinn is in charge. So some people are like, okay, well, what did the Giants do when Dan Quinn was at Dallas? How did they fare up there? So we'll have to see. But, in terms of the uniforms, it's just something about the burgundy and gold that brings out the best in the Giants.
Yeah, it's like the bull when they see red, right? It just turns them up a notch for some reason. If the Washington Commanders are going to come away with a win and break this trend, there's a very important rookie that everybody knows about that's going to help do that. But there's a rookie on the other side of this matchup that rookie knows very well. That's also going to be a key part of a win for the New York Giants. We'll break down the 3 things that both teams must do in order to get a victory this Sunday. Coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're going to do that thanks to our friends over at FanDuel. You've heard us talking about FanDuel a lot, and that's because America's #1 sportsbook is FanDuel. We've got a little something different for you running this month. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel that at any time. I've taken advantage of that, so I'm enjoying my 3 free weeks of NFL Sunday Ticket, even though most Sundays I'm a little bit busy and can't watch all the games anyway. But you get it for free, so take advantage of it. And if that's not enough for you, be sure to check out FanDuel's Profit Boost in the app and use it for FanDuel's Double Your Winnings for all of Sunday, September 15th, pregame money line bets. Profit Boost will be live starting Thursday, September 12th. So view your account page now to learn more about your boost. The Commanders are right now 1.5-point favorites in week 2 against the New York Giants. So whatever you want to bet on, go to FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. This week's Crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Giants and Locked On Commanders brought to you by Prize Picks. And we've got 3 most important things that Patricia, the Giants, don't need to do. The Giants should not that they should do it. They must do these 3 things to beat the mighty Washington Commanders. What are they?
Number 1, get the ball to Malik Neighbors. I mean, last week the Giants targeted him, I want to say, 5 times, and just that's not enough. You've got this dynamic receiver, this guy who can get behind defenses, this guy who can separate. And you got to get the ball in his hands. It's that simple. I'm not saying throw every single pass to him, but certainly get him some more targets than just, the 5 or so that he had in week 1. It's like, almost like he was invisible. I don't want to say invisible, but, he didn't make the impact that I think a lot of people were hoping that he could make in that game. So feed Leak, as he likes to be called. So that's number 1. Number 2, get after Jaden Daniels. As good as Jaden Daniels might look, he's still a rookie. He's still going to make rookie mistakes. He's still going to be vulnerable to pass pressure. He's going to be vulnerable probably to disguised defenses. So do what you've got to do to get pressure on this guy and hope that he turns the ball over, makes a mistake, tries to fit something into where it doesn't belong. Just, turnovers. The Giants have a pretty good 1-loss record when they can force at least 2 turnovers in a game. I think there's something like 5-1 since going back to 2022. So get the turnovers, force the quarterback to make mistakes. And then finally, I'm going to come back to Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones has got to play better than he did last week. Not force stuff into tight windows, be smart about the ball. The turnovers have got to stop. Now, I anticipate Daniel Jones is probably going to rely on his legs a lot in an effort to move the ball. That's really the strength of his game right now, but they've got to open things up. He can't be reluctant to take some deep shots down the field. I know last week the Vikings did some stuff that took away some of those deep passes, but not every play. There were opportunities to get the ball down the field when they're there, recognize them, take them, and hit them.
Yeah, look, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they didn't really expose the secondary because I think pretty much everybody already knew the secondary wasn't necessarily as strong due to the Washington Commanders defense, but they certainly took advantage of it. And Malik Neighbors, 5 catches, Terry McLaurin fans would love for Terry McLaurin to just get 5 targets. Terry McLaurin, 4 targets in week 1, 2 catches. So they hear you on the feed your number 1 receiver. Again, doesn't matter if your number 1 guy is a quote unquote number 1 receiver in the NFL. If he's your number 1, you should be feeding him, and getting pressure on any rookie quarterback is always going to be good for any opposing defense. But of course, the trick on both sides of this matchup, right, is going to be keeping that pocket disciplined while you're trying to pressure that quarterback, because you let him leak out, and that's how you give up 88 yards rushing. And then of course, Daniel Jones, his relationship to this rivalry is well documented. Patricia, for the Commanders, the 3 things that they got to do, must do: tackle and finish, which obviously includes tackling, protect Jaden Daniels, and make your stinking field goal kicks. So tackling, the Washington Commanders actually got a lot of pressure on Baker Mayfield. If I remember correctly, it was 9 pressures on Baker Mayfield against Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I cannot tell you how many times I watched Baker Mayfield ping pong in the pocket, move left, move right, move back, move up, and then escape and get yards either with his feet or extend the play and find a receiver downfield. Because again, no secondary, I don't care how good your secondary is, they're not going to be able to cover for 5 to 7 seconds. Bad ones especially cannot cover for 5 to 7 seconds. So they've got to absolutely finish those pressures, turn them into sacks, turn them into QB hits, turn them into strip sacks, whatever you had to do. But also just tackling. There were some tackling issues on the field. And again, you talk about guys like Daniel Jones and how much they're going to get out of there. And you're 100% right. Watching the tape of the Vikings-Giants game, a lot of the times Daniel Jones did damage with his feet. It's because the Minnesota Vikings, in an effort to get pressure, lost pocket contain. They lost their own pocket contain, and you can't do that against quarterbacks that are looking to take advantage of you, like Jaden Daniels. Right now in week 1, we saw good protection of Jaden Daniels in the sense that Jaden was getting down and getting out of bounds. Didn't take a lot of hits. I know his helmet came off a couple of times, and that's all everybody's talking about. But for the most part, his weird little combat roll that he's got going on instead of sliding was being pretty effective, and he was protecting himself. Eventually, as long as he continues to do that, we'll get to a point where we don't bring that up on a regular basis. But it's only week 2. We've only seen it 1 week. So we got to see more of Jaden Daniels making these smart decisions as he's running before we're able to move on from that topic. And then field goal kickers. Patricia, when's the last time you saw a Super Bowl winning team go through 5 kickers in one season?
Never.
Yeah. When's the last time you saw a team go through 5 kickers through week 1 of the NFL season? The Washington Commanders.
I mean, the Giants came close last year. They went through what, 4 kickers, 5 kickers, or something like that. But they were hardly a Super Bowl contender.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, having an established kicker is important.
Absolutely. The Washington Commanders are 0-1, and they are on their 5th kicker, Austin Seibert, coming in for week 2. 5th time's the charm, as they say. So we'll see how he can do. But look, there were multiple times, Patricia, where the Washington Commanders actually were within a score or could have gotten it down to 1 score in that Tampa Bay game if their field goals are made. But Cade York misses 2 field goals, kicks a kickoff out of bounds, darn near misses an extra point. That's why he's out, and Austin Seibert is here. So yeah, they got to tackle, they got to protect Jaden, including Jaden protecting himself, and they got to make kicks. You got to convert point. When you got a rookie quarterback, you got to convert points when the points are there to be converted.
Yeah. I mean, look, you can't squander away scoring opportunities no matter what they might be, because you'd only get so many opportunities to do that. And if you're squandering them away, that missed point, that missed field goal, that missed touchdown, they add up and they can be the difference in the game.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Washington Commanders lost by 17 points in the end, right? So whatever, but 6-point difference throughout the course of the game can potentially alter the outcome of that game. Even if they lose, maybe it alters the outcome to where they don't lose by as much. But that's going to do it for this crossover episode. You got one more episode of Locked On Commanders, one more episode of Locked On Giants coming up this weekend, at least one more, I should say, before these 2 teams take the field. So make sure you're coming through for those. In the meantime, if you've got your thoughts, just share them with Patricia, share them with me. You guys know how to do that. Make sure you're also checking out the Locked On NFL podcast. Madman Tyler Rowland kicks you off every morning, and the barber Tony Wiggins brings you through in the afternoon for some real NFL talk. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it is twice a day. As always, thanks so much for making Locked On Giants and Locked On Commanders your first listens of the day, every day, everydayers. Thanks for coming through like you do. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and we'll see you next time right back here at Locked On Giants and Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.